Hello and welcome to the Sunday evening message for Lansdowne Evangelical Free Church for the 19th of June 2022. Like the morning message, I'm recording this a couple of days before on an extremely hot late morning in my office. And if you're very observant, if you've already watched the morning, you will notice that my hair is shorter on this occasion. That's because I'm recording the day after I recorded the morning one. And yes, I have had a haircut. So if that's troubling you, I've announced it now. So now we can concentrate on listening to God's word. And I pray us benefiting from God's word as we continue in our studies in the life of Joseph. We've come now to chapter 39 of Genesis. So I'm going to pray, I'm going to ask that God would speak to us through his word now, and then we're going to read the passage together and then spend some time looking at its meaning and application for our lives. And for that we need the help of the Holy Spirit. I don't want to bring you a lecture on the life of Joseph. I want to open up God's word. So let's ask him to help me as I record and you as you listen to this message, wherever you are and whenever you're listening to it. Let's pray. Our Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you that your word is not limited by location. Indeed, as this passage shows us, your presence is not limited by location. And we pray that wherever we are, when we hear this message, that you would speak to us through your word by the power of your Holy Spirit. Lord, stir faith, challenge, convict, encourage. You know what each of us needs. And I pray that to this end, that you would make me in this recording a faithful servant who opens up your word truthfully so that your voice is really heard. We commend this time into your hands, our Father, and we do so in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen. Amen. Let me read to you the whole of Genesis 39, the 23 verses. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field, so he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And she spoke to Joseph day after day. He would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. As soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. As soon as he heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried out. He left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house." As soon as his master heard the words, his wife spoke to him, "This way your servant treated me." His anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Now, one of the most popular verses of Scripture is Hebrews 13 verse 5, or the second half of Hebrews 13 verse 5. The first half speaks about keeping yourselves from the love of money, but the second half says, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." This indeed is a precious promise. But if we're honest, we will all have had those times when it doesn't seem like the Lord is with us, especially when things are difficult. One of the devil's temptations for us in times of trouble is that God has forgotten us or abandoned us, so that we are effectively on our own. Now, God's promise in Hebrews 13:5 and in other scriptures, "I am the Lord and I am with you. When you pass through the waters and the fire, I am with you. The water shall not overwhelm you. The fire shall not burn you." All of these scriptures, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." They're all there for us to stand upon. But God is gracious. God knows our weaknesses. And so he's not only given us great and precious promises, but he's given us great and precious examples of people that when we look at them, it appears as if God has left them at a human level. Their situation is very, very difficult. And yet, there's evidence that God is with them. And indeed, in this particular chapter, it is explicit. In fact, it says so 7 times. Verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph. Verse 3, his master saw that the Lord was with him. Again, verse 3, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed. Verse 4, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. Verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. Verse 23, and again twice, the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. And it's interesting also and important for us to note that exactly the same phrases and the affirmation of God's presence and blessing upon Joseph in terms of granting him success, exactly the same is found when things are going relatively well in Potiphar's house and when things are going very, very badly in the prison house. I say relatively well because, of course, we must not forget that Joseph was still a slave. But there appeared, after a while, in Potiphar's house to be a season of success and blessing. The Lord is with him. But then when all is taken away and he's in prison, it still says the Lord was with him. So this is a really precious encouragement to us. Whatever the trouble, the Lord was with Joseph. And also, the evident presence of God Almighty with Joseph was noticed by both Potiphar and by the governor or keeper of the prison. And indeed, this is an example of the blessing of Abraham, where Abraham was told, through your offspring all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Potiphar is blessed by having Joseph in his household, as is the keeper of the prison. So we need to take this lesson and initially meditate upon this lesson of the presence of the Lord, which is with us everywhere and always. And this is the main point of the chapter. Yes, we have this very sanitary lesson when we see Joseph being tempted by Potiphar's wife, and a very unjust reaction of Potiphar, which doesn't change the Lord being with Joseph. So before we get into that, and that's very important in terms of God's purposes to position Joseph as to where he desires Joseph to be, and so therefore we can take encouragement from the challenges we face are all part of God's good purposes to place us where he wants us to be and give us the experience that we need in order to serve him in future ways, or to be one who can get alongside those who are suffering a similar road to the road that we've walked down. All those things are true, but at the heart of it, just want to spend some time reflecting on this wonderful statement. The Lord was with Joseph. Verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, and also at the end of the chapter. But I think it's also important for us to see the context of these statements. Now, it is interesting to note that after chapter 39, the Lord, the covenant name of God, is barely mentioned. It's mentioned by Jacob, but not particularly mentioned in relation to the life of Joseph. So why is that? Why is it? Is it God has abandoned him? No, it's certainly not. There is still, just like in Esther, the book of Esther, God's name is not mentioned explicitly, and yet it's very evident of God Almighty's hand over all those events in the book of Esther. The same is true of the rest of the book of Genesis. God's evident hand upon those things. But the fact that God's covenant name is mentioned so much in chapter 39 is an additional encouragement, because chapter 39 is a chapter of Joseph's struggles. And the emphasis here on the Lord was with Joseph is to encourage us that when we walk by faith, when we walk in the midst of trouble, we have that absolute assurance that God is with us. Yes, he's with us in times of success, but we need that reminder more in times of trouble. Now, it's also very interesting, all those 7 instances that I've read to you are given to us by the narrator. Joseph himself mentions God once and actually uses the general name for God, Elohim, in verse 9 when he's speaking to the pagan wife of Potiphar. So this is the narrator's observation, not necessarily what was at the forefront of Joseph's mind, although clearly Joseph was a man of integrity who walked with God. But we are being told this by the narrator because even though the trouble is great for Joseph, and trouble might be great for those that are reading this, it's very likely that Moses was the human being, the man through whom God worked to record for us these books of sacred scripture. And God wants us to know, even when all the external evidence is that we are alone, we're not alone, because the Lord is with us. And I think we need to just pause with verse 1 for a moment to underline how difficult the circumstances were. We can easily skip over this. Now Joseph was brought down to Egypt. Yes? What does that tell us? Well, it's not saying Joseph is not being taken to Jerusalem. Joseph is not being taken to some other place in the promised land. It may, because of course to leave home, to move to another city is a hard thing. But Joseph is being taken completely away from the covenant community. Last time when we looked at Judah, we saw the warning of how Judah went down from his brothers. And that's a warning to us not to separate ourselves from the people of God, because that was the first step in Judah's slippery slope into sin. However, there are seasons, as I said last time, and there are individuals in whom God is working for a purpose where they are alone. And I think it's important to recognize Joseph in Egypt was alone. Now, I was originally planning to read a chunk from a commentary, but I've already talked for quite a while in this. But Egypt was not God's people. It was full of pagan gods, of constant pagan worship. And Joseph went to serve in the house of an Egyptian official who would have been well off indeed because of his honor and love toward the pagan gods and being very much part of the system of Egypt. We know this because at the end of verse 5 it says he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. And of course we know from a bit later in the book of Genesis 43 and verse 32, that Joseph and the other Egyptians ate by themselves, because of course to all intents and purposes Joseph was, as far as his brothers were concerned, were just an Egyptian. So he followed the customs of the Egyptians and separated himself out for the purposes of eating. Joseph, as a Hebrew in Potiphar's house, could not prepare Potiphar's food because Joseph was not of Potiphar's religion. So here he is thrown into a pagan, the true living God society, and full on in your face. And yet the Lord was with him. The second thing I think is important to note, again, that's found for us in verse 1, the end there. An Egyptian had bought him. This was not a new job for Joseph. Joseph was a slave. He was a slave. He had no rights, no independence. This was an assignment for life unless somebody else bought him or his master chose to free him. We talk very much about my rights in Western society. Joseph didn't have any. And we can see that later on in the accusations made against Joseph. Joseph had no voice. Joseph was not interviewed. There's no record of him being interviewed. It was the right word against Joseph. And even though it's very likely that Potiphar's wife had shown interest in other slaves, and that Potiphar would not have been unaware of these things, that actually Joseph had no right at all to defend himself. And yet, this chapter says 7 times, the Lord was with him. And so when we're up against it, when we are struggling, we need to know that the Lord is with us. Don't look at the external. Don't look at the circumstances. Don't look at the troubles. Yes, look at them in the sense of bringing them to God, but don't let them be our focus. Remember this. Remember Joseph. The Lord was with him. God is working out his purposes even through your struggles, even when it feels like you're struggling with these things alone, even when it doesn't feel like God's presence is with you. third thing to notice is God's presence was noticed. Verse 3, his master saw that the Lord was with him. Just to pause there. Potiphar is named in verse 1, and then he's simply his master. It does mention Potiphar's wife. He actually doesn't. It just says his master's wife all the way through. It doesn't say Potiphar again. And it's just to emphasize for us Joseph's position of slavery. He's owned, he's not free. Okay, so, but yet even in this terribly low position, this man, this Egyptian man, notices something about Joseph. Now, I think the text is not explicit. It says his master saw that the Lord was with him. It doesn't necessarily tell us that his master believed in the Lord. Maybe he knew that the Hebrews had this God, that he knew something about that. Obviously, there was some, in every religion actually, there's some awareness of a creator. So maybe there was some awareness of that. Maybe he was simply just thinking that Joseph is divinely blessed, as it seemed later Pharaoh may have thought that when he appointed Joseph. Again, Nebuchadnezzar thought initially that Daniel had the spirit of the gods in him, rather than actually being a servant of the true and living God. So we don't know if this was a full appreciation of Yahweh, the living God being with Joseph, in the sense of Potiphar recognizing that. But Potiphar saw the effect, saw some kind of divine influence in Joseph. And very often this is the case for Christians. Christians are a blessing to those around them. Often the world doesn't see it, they refuse to see it. The hatred blinds them. But very often you will see that businesses and households come under seasons of blessing because of the presence of believers. Now, that is God's divine blessing, but it's also the fact that if they are true believers, their godly conduct, their trustworthiness and so on, brings also a blessing. Again, I'm sure if you've done the Alpha course, you've heard this illustration of a employee of I think something like Selfridges or something like that, or a big important company, and the director once told an employee to lie for him, and the employee refused to lie for him. And the employee said to him, if I can lie for you, I can lie to you. But that principle of that employee's integrity led his employer to then actually trust him. And this, again, brought blessing. So there's a principle. It's not necessarily a promise that everything's going to go well. It doesn't go well for Joseph in the long run. But there's a principle here that actually believers walk with God, which has an effect on those around him. And as a believer, it's important we talk about that, so that people don't just think, oh, you're just a nice person. But nonetheless, we should strive when we're in the world, even under pressure, to be the very best we possibly can be for the glory of God. Now it says here in the ESV, verse 2, he became a successful man. Verse 3, his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord caused all he did to succeed in his hands. The word there for succeed is the same word as the word for prosper in Psalm 1 and verse 3. It's like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season. Whatever he does prospers. Now, it's important to understand that this is a principle that doesn't necessarily apply to material prosperity. We can't say, oh, the Lord is with me, therefore I'm going to get rich. Because actually Joseph did not get rich. Joseph's blessing was passed on to Potiphar's household, not to Joseph himself. But Joseph was enriched in The Lord, because Joseph was then able to endure the most intense temptation, and Joseph was able to still remain faithful to God when falsely accused, and continue to walk in the Lord's presence in those years in prison. Joseph prospered. And we need to realize that God is with us in trouble, and God's plan in our lives is to prosper us in himself, that we then grow up in him. And then finally, on this heading of God's presence being with us always and everywhere, is that God's presence is not changed by circumstances. I've mentioned this already, I just want to reinforce it to you. You compare the first 5 verses of Genesis 39 with the last 3 verses of Genesis 39, the parallels are very, very clear. The same Joseph, the same Lord, the hand of God's blessing upon him. God's presence is not limited by location. God's presence is not limited by hardship. Joseph was bought. God's presence becomes evident to those around us. And finally, God's presence is not changed by circumstances. But God's presence doesn't mean it's easy. Number 1, Joseph didn't go to Egypt and sit around and do nothing. You don't see this mentioned explicitly in the text. But how can Joseph, as a slave, coming into the Egyptian's house, would have started out as menial work? He may have had some responsibility because he would evidently have been a man of some kind of learning. Slaves were not just kind of automatically the lowest of the low in the household. But there's an evidence in this chapter of progression. So verse 2, he was in the house. So he wasn't in the fields, he was in the house. And then verse 4, Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. So this is becoming a personal servant to Potiphar, the head of the household. And then it says also verse 4, he made him overseer of his house, put him in charge of all he had. And then verse 6, he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. Now, often we think, oh, well, if God's going to bless me, I don't need to do anything. Well, actually, yes, we do. We need to be faithful and diligent in the things that God has given us to do, and let him lead us. Be faithful and diligent in the things that God has given us to do, and let him lead us. If you are working for an organization, work to the best of your ability and let him work. Give him the glory. Entrust how that works out in your long-term future to him. If you're looking after children at home or juggling work and family life, work at both to the best of your ability as God gives strength. Ask him to make you fruitful and successful in both of those things, and trust him with the future. If you're retired, ask the Lord to use your retirement for his glory. Don't just sit around waiting for something to drop into your lap. Look for things to do. Look for ways you can be engaged in the world around, engage in community and service, or service in the local church, or even service in a local community, in a local school or a food bank or something of that nature, a local charity where you can be involved. We don't sit around. Joseph did not sit around. The presence of God is not a ticket to putting our feet up. It's an opportunity to work for him with absolute confidence that he is with us. and that he will bring fruit in his way, in his time, through our work. Let's be faithful and diligent. Secondly, and I've realised I'm looking at the clock on this camera, which now says 30 minutes. I'm not going to got time to go into more details. I'm going to have to move this to a future sermon, but I want to mention it. God being with us does not mean that we won't be tempted. It's very important. And it's not accidental that the second half of verse 6 says this: Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. The first half of verse 6 says that Joseph's master left all he had in Joseph's charge. That is the height of Joseph's success in the house of Potiphar. And even in the same verse, the situation's changing. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time, or at that time, as Joseph developed and grew in the household, and obviously coming as a 17-year-old, he would have been young, and he was progressing in age. He was 30 when he was appointed as the deputy to Pharaoh. We're told that later on in the book of Genesis. And we're told he was at least 2 years in the prison. So he would have been a good 10 years perhaps with Potiphar's house. So we don't know exactly what point it is, but when Joseph got to that point of promotion, to the height of being the chief slave, as it were, Potiphar's wife cast her eye at him. Temptation was handed to him on a plate. We need to be on our guard. There are temptations when we are struggling. Temptations to doubt God, to question God. Temptations to give up. Temptations to think, what's the point in carrying on? Temptations to be angry with other people, angry at our circumstances, to become bitter. All of those things. But there are temptations to success, because success creates a following. There can be great spiritual success. There can be temptation after you've shared your faith and you get so excited about that, and then the enemy comes in and hands something to you on a plate, and your guard is down because you think you've done well. Or you've resisted sin, a particular sin. Many of us have those besetting sins that come after us again and again and again. And we have seasons of success, and then we let our guard down and we fall again. And so we need to be on our guard. The presence of God does not stop us being tempted. The war is there continuously. The Lord's Prayer, and again I've said this before, given the Lord's Prayer says, give us this day our daily bread, it suggests it to be prayed daily. Also part of the Lord's Prayer is lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. A daily fight. So that's a moment by moment fight. We'll look at how we fight next time, because this sermon's already getting quite long. I just wanted to say that at this point, we're talking about the presence of God. It's key to everything in this chapter. It's key to you in whether you're going through such a dark time that, like Joseph, you feel alone. You're not, don't seem to be free. You may not be literally a slave, but you feel like when you're on this treadmill of trying to make ends meet and cope with life, look after children, concerned about your elderly parents, concerned about your neighbours, concerned about your own health, and you're on this treadmill like Joseph every single day. And yet you need to know God is with you. He was with Joseph in this terrible situation. Even through what comes next, is the presence of God does not mean we won't face even greater trouble. The cost of obedience, which again we'll look at more next time, doesn't insulate us from trouble. Doesn't insulate us from disappointment. Doesn't insulate us from injustice. A day is coming when there will be no injustice. But while we're on this earth, the presence of God does not mean we have an easy life. So often it's tempting to think, when I'm a Christian now, things should be easy, and they often get harder. There's a group of church planters in Scotland called 20 Schemes. And one of their folk written songs basically that says this: why is it getting harder? Why is it harder now I'm a believer? And it is. There will be injustice. There will be false accusation that come against us. People will try and take advantage of us. Potiphar should have stood up, but he must have known his wife's inclinations. He doesn't actually execute Joseph, which is what he probably should have done, but puts him in prison. Perhaps because he's actually not entirely convinced, but he has to be seen to act, but it's still unjust. But yet the Lord is still with Joseph. That ancient, not that ancient, older hymn. It is well with my soul, as Satan should buffet, though trials should come. It is still well with my soul. Brothers and sisters, the Lord is with you always. Always. But it doesn't mean it's easy. In fact, often it's harder. The more we are engaged in serving and seeking to honour the living God, the more we become a target of the enemy's temptations and a target of the world's hatred. Joseph had just gone along with Potiphar's wife and probably kept it a secret for many, many years and kept his job. But now he chooses to stand firm to please the living God who is with him. And so he makes himself a target of the enemy's attack. And so we need to know the Lord is with us. Take heart from Joseph's experience and this deliberate way in which the chapter is recorded for us. In those opening verses, the Lord was with Joseph. And there in the prison, the same thing, the Lord was with Joseph. Take heart, whatever your circumstances, however low they get, however good they get, however low they may become again, however powerful temptation is, however disappointed you may be by your circumstances, however unjustly you may be treated, the Lord is with you. And that's the greatest thing of all. It's greater than success. It's greater than the pleasures of sin. It's greater than being liked by the world. The Lord is with you. So may God help us to keep our eyes on him and know in our hearts, however hard it is, we're not alone. The Lord will never leave you nor forsake you. And that is the absolute truth. Let's pray. Our Father, just commit this truth back to you in that sense that we know it in our heads. But pray, Lord, that it become a heart experience. Come, Lord God. Speak these truths and write them afresh upon our hearts. You know the trouble all of us are going through. You know those of us who are going through times of relative peace and success. You're with us in both. Lord, you know those of us who are facing terrible season of temptation. You're with us in that also. Lord, you know those of us for whom a season of temptation is coming. You will be with us in that also. Lord, you know those of us for whom a season of disappointment and injustice is coming. And you're with us in that also. Help us to see it. Help us to stand firmly on your word. Help us to believe it with all our hearts. count the cost of being faithful to you, because you are our exceeding joy. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. God bless you richly. I didn't quite cover what was the plan when I started this recording, but I pray that what has been recorded will be a real blessing and encouragement to your soul. Thank you for listening.